Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I am Yusuke and you are watching a video on aep.dev. This is the second part of a video series on aep.dev, the tooling, the ecosystem, the specification, and today we're talking about our AEP compiler, or aepc, that we use to generate the APIs. So let's get started. So first off, I wanted to rehash some of the content from a previous video here that talks a little bit about the API tooling ecosystem that we plan on providing. So here you'll see here's a diagram of the ecosystem we're trying to build. On the left hand side we have the AEP resource definition, and that kind of alludes to the fact that aep.dev is at its core a specification around APIs built around resources. So you'll have resources like a bookstore or a book belonging to an API, and you'll define the relationships between those resources using this resource definition language. What type of fields they support, what type of methods. From there, we can generate a lot of this ecosystem that you see on the right-hand side. So we can generate the service definition that includes the particular API expressed in things like OpenAPI or protobuf. We can generate gRPC services from there, generate REST APIs from those gRPC services, or we can generate them directly. And once you have those services exposed, you can generate a whole ecosystem of clients, like Terraform providers, command line interfaces, custom resources for Kubernetes, and LLM plugins, and so on. But today we're primarily going to focus on this resource definition and the service and resource hub and the protobuf there. So let's go ahead and get started. So what you're looking at here is the aepc repository with an aep-dev, and I've already kind of cloned that for the sake of time. But there's an example directory inside of there, bookstore/v1, and that contains this bookstore.yaml. This is the resource definition I was talking about. It's the fundamental unit of AEPs. And you'll see here that there's a lot of stuff that's kind of standard for defining an API, and it's resource oriented. You'll define the API name and you'll define the resources that exposes. Inside of this resource definition, we have things like the singular and the plural, which is helpful for both services and client generation, as well some of the properties or fields of that resource that defines kind of the schema. And here at the bottom you'll have the methods like create, read, update, delete. Those are explicitly listed because not every single resource exposes every single standard method as well. But a lot of this is basically all you need to define an API and generate these resources and fields and schemas and whatnot within either protobuf or OpenAPI, HTTP plus JSON. So we'll go ahead and get started here. To use the tool aepc, you just kind of run this go install GitHub aepc at latest. And in this case, this regenerate all is a example local in the directory, but you can go ahead and follow along with this go install. And from there, you can run the aepc command. You pass in the resource definition that you'll see here, and then you pass in sort of the root of the file names that you want. And you'll see here it generates these two different files, proto and OpenAPI. So if you click on the proto, you'll see that the original resource definition was about 32 lines of code or configuration, and here this proto is about 160. So you'll see here that there's an incredible amount of lines saved just by authoring that resource definition here. And what it does is it generates a fully AEP specification compliant protobuf gRPC definition that includes the standard methods and a bunch of the nuances about how those methods should be constructed as well. So we'll have our bookstore service, we have create book, get book, update book, just like those methods that were specified. The API definition, they adhere to a lot of the AEP requirements, like adhering to google.api.http, having the appropriate method signatures. The create requests are also generated for you. And this is a huge time savings in contrast to authoring all of these by hand, where it's very error prone. You'll have to run them through some sort of linter or validator, look at those mistakes, fix them, and you end up in this cycle that's quite toilsome and not particularly valuable. So you'll see here that all of the properties that we added for that book resource, like published, price, edition, and path, are all specified in here. And if I wanted to, I could go back to this bookstore.yaml and pretty quickly add my own field, right? So I do have to be careful about things like field numbers to make sure that they don't conflict. But if I put in like 7 here and I say sale price. Let's do something that's a little bit appropriate and something that you might actually need. I can rerun this aepc, and you'll see here in the bookstore.proto that there's that field sale price. If protobuf is not your preferred interface or protocol, we have the OpenAPI definition as well that gets printed with all of the exact same information, and this adheres to the HTTP plus JSON variant of the aep.dev with very, very similar specifications with some slight differences to ensure that we adhere to the best practices of the particular protocol. So once you have that generated, the next part is to actually go ahead and generate our service. So in our example here, I'm using buff to generate the actual protobuf definitions in Go, the files themselves, as well as using gRPC gateway, which will bridge a gRPC service to HTTP as well. So despite the fact that our service is written in protobuf and gRPC, we will be actually using the HTTP interface for this example. There's a lot of boilerplate here that you can see in the example file, and that just kind of contains some of the boilerplate setup that has to do with this gRPC HTTP gateway service. But the actual code that we've implemented here really is this service.go, and you'll see here I'm implementing those protobuf RPCs, and what I'm going to do is I just have this in-memory book database that's here to emulate some of the create, read, update, delete behaviors that you'd see in the common REST API. So nothing's really special about that, but I'm going to go ahead and run the example. And I have there's a couple of test scripts that are valuable for people who want to take a look at this later as well, where we are where you can basically run through these examples and try out the various things. So this is going to okay, the bind address is already used. Okay, I've got it up on another tab. So basically, I'm going to start up my service. You can see that both the gRPC service and the HTTP are open up at various ports, and now I can actually start playing with my API. So here we're going to just export the book ID here, just for the sake of our example, and I can do things like create the book. So I can create the book. You'll see that it generates this resource. If I want, I can do a get immediately after. Let's take a look at what's actually written. Oh, I'm sorry, the book method is actually suffixed with a book. So you'll see there. It returns back the book that I'm looking for. If I want to, I can go ahead and modify that book. I can set a price, let's say of 100, and I can go ahead and update that, and you'll see there the price value is updated to 100. I could do a get again to return that back, and then finally I could delete the book as well. So you'll see here, effectively with just kind of 32 lines of code and some additional boilerplate, I can add a new resource relatively quickly, just fill in the blanks with the business logic, and I have a API that is quite REST-ish and also compliant to the specification, which enables this whole ecosystem. So in future talks, we'll talk a lot about the clients and how we use that. But even the existing API as is means you can use things like the OpenAPI generator to create clients, create services. You can use the protobuf generators, and your APIs will be very uniform, ensuring a better user experience. That's kind of it. Thanks for following along. I just wanted to say we'll have additional videos in the future series around the CLIs and the validators that we have for the specification. And as always, a little plug to get more involved. Here's a little slide where you can learn about that, but really just go ahead and join us at the AEP Slack channel in the CNCF Slack and ask questions, and we're happy to answer them. There's also multiple ways that we need help today. So if you want to work with us on improving our protobuf generators, writing clients, API guidance, and lots of smaller improvements, we have plenty of things that we would love help on. Thank you very much.